If it's okay with you, we'll start with the first quote. What was your conversation like with your partner? Austin, we'll start with you.
Like the first one is kind of like deeper than the other one. It's saying that's like coming from the heart, so it like affects, and it's like saying more than the other one.
Okay. Can you continue that conversation with your peers for me, Austin?
Does anyone have any other idea? Keegan?
I was thinking as in like your heart controls your body, so you can have words control you too. As in you can use so powerful words that it almost like controls your body. Like it can control someone else's like emotions.
Interesting.
Does anyone else have another thought? Maddie?
I agree with Keegan because the heart is very powerful, and just like words can describe anything powerful, and they can describe things in a more serious way that mean more to us.
Now, I have a question. From what I'm hearing so far, I'm getting the sense that you feel this first quote has a positive view of language.
Yes.
I'm getting that sense from your conversations. Can we switch to the second quote? I want to hear your thoughts now on that second quote in relation to language. What is this person trying to tell us about language? Tyler, can you start our conversation?
How you talk, if it's corrupting it, it's kind of like stopping you from breathing. Because, like, then you can't really communicate with others.
Okay. Can you continue the
Does
conversation?
anybody else have another thought? Juliet?
In the second quote, I was thinking that corrupts means like they stump you, so you can't use words in the language that you want to speak. So it's kind of hard for you to say what you want to say if it corrupts your mind. Does anybody have anything else? Lily?
Well, I thought this one was like I felt like this one, like sometimes things slip and you say stuff that you regret, and when that happens, there most likely will be consequences. So that's what I think corrupts means.
Interesting. Can I stop you for a second, Lily?
I have a couple of shapes, and I want you to start talking to each other about what they have in common, how we could sort them. Go ahead.
Sort them by how many parallel edges they have.
Okay.
We could also sort them by how many right angles they have, or acute angles.
What else?
Sort them by size.
What do you mean size?
Like if one's really small and one is really big, then you could put the small ones and the big ones in different piles.
Can you get your hands in here and start doing that? And why don't you talk about what you see so that other people can add?
Versions of them.
Yeah, there are. Like this one, they're like the same shape, but this one's bigger and that one's like fatter, but smaller-ish.
So can we make some groups? Shay, what do you have over here?
Trapezoids.
Oh, how do you know that they're trapezoids?
Well, this is a square because they have one set of parallel lines and then the others will eventually cross.
Great, and what's that math word that we use for cross?
Intersect.
Intersect, great. So do you agree with Shay that these shapes have a name and that name is?
Trapezoid.
Great, so let me find in here my label that says trapezoid. All right, so we have one group of shapes. Are there others?
Yeah, we made a rectangle group and we made a parallelogram group. We also made a square group.
So I can tell that these shapes are different, but can you use words to tell me what makes them different?
They are different sizes.
So let's look at like this group and this group. They're different. What is different about them? Can you jump in?
Squares have all right angles, and parallelograms have two acute angles and two obtuse angles.
Oh, so Sadie's giving me some names here. So what was that name that we called these shapes?
Squares.
Squares. And they're squares because they have
Four angles.
four 90-degree angles.
And all their sides are the same length.
And all their sides are the same length. Wait a minute. What about this one? who can tell me what makes these two quadrilaterals parallelograms? Shay, jump in.
All the sides are parallel because these could go like this and these could go like that.
So if we're talking about pairs of parallel lines, who can tell me a little bit more about parallelograms?
Well, these two are pairs and these two are pairs, but with this wouldn't be a parallelogram because it only has one pair, but these has two pairs of parallel sides.
Okay, so I see now. So we have two pairs of parallel lines. That's what makes it a parallelogram. And can we attach a name to this shape?
Somebody.
A rectangle. And what are the attributes of a rectangle?
Two sides are one length and the other two sides are like a smaller length. So it's like a longer shape, but it's not as like tall up and down, but it goes farther that way. And it's made up of 4 right angles.
Great. Anybody else have anything to add? Because I see some parallel lines. Does anyone notice some parallel lines? Sadie, jump in.
It has 2 sets of parallel lines.
Oh my goodness. So do rectangles and parallelograms have something in common?
Yeah.
What do you think, Shay?
They're both parallelograms.
Huh. That's really interesting. That a rectangle can be both a rectangle and a parallelogram. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
If a rectangle can be a parallelogram, why can't a square? Or can it?
Can I move these groups here? What do you think? What makes a parallelogram a parallelogram? Jump in.
It
2 sets of
has-
parallel lines.
So do squares have 2 pairs of parallel lines? Yeah. So can squares also be parallelograms? Wow. Josie.
Rectangles are kind of like stretched out squares.
Yeah. And I think that's what Elise was talking about. It's almost like you stretch one of the sides, right? And if you were to smush it together, it would make a
Square.
square. All right. Questions? Elise?
The trapezoid is like in its own group, but like these are related. I'm wondering if the trapezoid is somehow related.
Well, what is the attribute that makes a trapezoid a trapezoid? Jump in.
There's 2 lines that would intersect, and then there's 1 pair of parallel lines.
Yeah, and so what's different about a trapezoid and any parallelogram? What's different?
It only has 1 pair of parallel lines, but parallelograms have 2 sets of parallel lines.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Elise, that these 3 shapes are related, these 3 quadrilaterals are related, and that the trapezoid doesn't quite fit in with that group because it only has the 1 pair.
When we do volleyball style, if you've shared and I haven't cleared the board yet, make sure you're doing the listening because there's still a couple of people that need to share. So Drew shared with us that we had 22 pennies. Does this give anybody any ideas how else we can represent 0.22?
Could we use dollars that same way?
Tara, come on up here. Just walk straight up there. Just walk straight up here. If I said, okay, you get 0.22, what are you going to take?
22.
Okay, Drew said he's going to take 22 of those. Can you do it in a different way? Okay, how can you get 0.22?
Dime.
Okay,
Then take 2 cents.
okay. So Tara took 2 dimes and 2 pennies. Did she represent 0.22?
Yeah.
Our first way that we can represent 0.22 is 2 dimes, 2 pennies.
I never thought of that money.
You didn't think of that in money. That's what the whole idea of this lesson is, relating decimals to what's happening around in real life.
Could you use dollars and subtract from it decimals?
Could you take a dollar and subtract something to get down to 0.22, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to be working on that later on in the lesson, subtracting the decimals. Not this lesson, but in the unit. Okay, let's take a look at money here for a second.
Money.
All right, if we have money, I had a couple of other examples. Andy, I think, was it you that shared we could have 4 nickels?
No, that was me.
Maddie shared. We could have 4 nickels, and we could have 2 pennies.
That works.
Anything else? Someone mentioned one before.
Bravery.
What makes you say bravery?
Because in the river there was crocodiles.
She was a very brave girl, wasn't she? Going out on that river on her own, right? So you're right, bravery is a theme. Why friendship? What makes you say that friendship is a theme? Go ahead.
I think friendship is a theme because like she just met the Miss Jenkins, and she said that she helped her read the list and help her buy the thing, and she's gonna teach her. So I think it's like friendship.
Yeah, she wants to build a friendship with her. She's like, you come to town more often, and I'll teach you how to read, right? So they built a friendship together, right?
Okay, and in the text it says this word stigmatized. What do you think that word stigmatized means? And if you'd like, could you tell us what line number that was on, Benaya, when she talks 50. About line 50? So folks, you can go ahead and turn to line 50. Let's see if we can figure out what that word stigmatized means. Because Shirley says her personal role too, right, is that if a woman steps out of order, they're stigmatized as being what?
Unfeminine.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Adrienne?
Unfeminine.
Unfeminine, right? Unfeminine. Okay, so Kyle, what do you think that means, stigmatized then?
Labeled.
Labeled. Very good, right? Labeled as stigmatized, right? So this table, I'm going to come back to you, okay? Labeled as stigmatized. Do you think Shirley ever felt what it was like to be stigmatized or labeled as something?
Yes.
Okay, and why do you think that?
Because she was African American, and since she was a woman, she was going to be labeled because she was in a house of like political terms, and that she was going to be picked on about that.
Okay, and what else is she doing? What else is she trying to do?
She's trying to fight for women to have equal rights as men to get any job they want except for typing.
Right. She's trying to get women a job that requires thought, not just do you type, okay? She's trying to say, yes, this is what we want. We want women in the workforce. We want women to be leaders, okay? All right, good job.
Let's stick with Olivia. Can you say what you had again? I want to build off of, do you agree with what Olivia said? Do you think it's the same? Do you think it's different? Say it again.
I said in word form you could either have you could either write 0.22 or just 0.22.
Oh, then you would write it out like 0.22, like, yeah. You write the words 0.22 in word form. That's why it says word.
In word form, could you write it 0.22 hundredths?
Well, I say you would, since that's the place value that it is. So I'd say you would write 22 hundredths.
I think too. Because 22 hundredths, because the 22 is, the last number is hundreds because the 1 is before the decimal.
Okay. So let's take a look. Olivia started with 0.22. And then we said, well, could it be 22 hundredths? And Olivia came around to say that's what she wanted. 22 hundredths is correct. So we could also say 0. What was the word that this group was asking about? 0 and 22 hundredths would be another way to say this. 0 and 22 hundredths. All right. Now, how about if we did expanded form with decimals?
I think it might work.
Okay. Do you have any idea what that would be?
It would decimals. It would be 0.222.
What makes something expanded form? Anybody remember what we had?
Plus sign in the middle of it.
Okay. So, Andy, you haven't shared yet.
Yeah, you have a plus sign in between the numbers, and you have to, like, instead of saying, like, 321, you would say 300 plus 20 plus 1.
All right. So, can you use that knowledge for decimals?
Yeah.
And how do you know? What takes longer and how do you know? Oh, you got put on the spot, Emily. What takes longer and how do you know?
I think it's maybe 4/6 because if one half of a minute equals 30 minutes, probably.
Rephrase what you're thinking. 1/2 of a minute equals 30 minutes?
1/2 a minute equals 30 seconds because you're saying half of a minute and a minute is 60 seconds and half of 60 is 30. So if 4/6 is, I think 4/6 is more than 1/2 because it could be more seconds than 30 seconds.
How is Emily using her knowledge of fractions to correctly state that? How is she using her knowledge of fractions and what she knows about benchmark fractions and where fractions are in terms of greater than certain benchmarks or less than certain benchmarks? Geraldine, what do you think? So in other words, how does she know that 4/6 is greater than 1/2? Just looking solely, let's say we didn't even know how many seconds equals a minute. Just looking at those fractions, how do you know that 4/6 is greater?
I think that 4/6 is greater, just like Emily said, because if you divide 6 times 60, which is the seconds, it'll give you about like 10.
I think, let's forget about division, okay? Let's focus on our fractional knowledge. What do you know about halves and what do you notice about 4/6?
That 4/6 is greater than 1/2.
Why?
Because when you simplify the 4/6, it'll give you 2/3, and 2/3 is greater than 1/2.
Very good. But what else do we know about that 6 and how is it important to really analyze that 6? Gabby?
4/6 is greater than 1/2 because the half of 6 is 3 and the fraction will be 3/6 and this is 1 more than 1/2.
Very good. So what Gabby knows is this represents 1/2. 1/2 represents 1/2. She knows that 4/6 is greater than 1/2 because what is half of 6? 3. But do we have 3 parts of that 6? No. We have 4/6. All right. So we have more than that half.